Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the £1.2 billion TV deal in Scotland. We've gone 5 years in the future since last episode and we're going to thoroughly investigate what has happened. We're going to start off with the Scottish national side. The national side we usually start off with, so we're going to start off with Scotland, and they seem to be reaping the benefits of this extra TV deal. They're now 5th in the world, Scotland, which is incredible. So we're going to have a look now and see exactly what's happened over their past few years, I suppose. If we look at their schedule, we go back to the 2020s, and we left them last time in the Euro Championships against Portugal, Switzerland and Slovakia, which they lost quite badly, really badly actually, and they didn't really do much for the rest of the year, only winning a friendly against Moldova. So they must have dropped down quite a bit then. That must have been pretty bad. So they must have done something good recently. The year afterwards was much different. They basically won nearly all their World Cup qualification group games, apart from the game against Croatia here. But that put them in the World Cup, I'd imagine, those kind of results. And they did qualify for the World Cup. They get through their group. Oh my God. I've just seen this. Scotland have won the World Cup. Ryan Fraser with 2 goals against France in the final won them the World Cup in Qatar, or it probably gets changed, doesn't it? But I cannot believe that. Okay, right, let's look through this then. They lose to Spain, first of all. Fair enough, that's acceptable. But then they beat Jamaica and Uruguay. Jamaica game, I can understand. Uruguay game, not so much. They get through on penalties against Colombia and Portugal, get past Mexico in extra time in the semi-final, and then come up against France in the final and win it. I mean, this is it. I should experiment over now. Experiment over. Fair play, they won the World Cup. That is amazing. But they did go and lose then to Slovenia and Sweden later on in the year in European League Division C. So it wasn't all that good for them, I've got to say. They did go back down to their usual standards, I've got to say. Year afterwards, a very good year, only losing the one game in the Euro Championship qualification there. I mean, they nearly go and win the European Championships as well. They lose to France 3-0 in the semi-finals, which is bizarre. But they beat Germany, Poland, they drew with England and Northern Ireland and beat Russia. Really, really impressive stuff here from Scotland. This is flabbergasting. So that puts us into 2025. They've played 2 games so far, but they're going to play in the Confederations Cup soon against Canada, New Zealand and Ivory Coast B. So I think they're going to qualify from that group. And the weird thing is, they don't really have that good of a squad. Like, if we look at the best player, it's Jamie Gardner, who plays for Leicester, 158 current ability. That would struggle to get you into a national side like in England or a Spain or a Germany. So I don't know how they managed to win the World Cup and do so well. They have, though. I don't understand it. Jamie Gardner, though, with a potential 179 at 24 years old, probably won't get there. Oliver Burke is the next best player, followed by Kieran Tierney. So the same sort of players we've identified in the recent episode, last episode rather. I just don't understand how they've done it. In terms of potential, Ross Taylor comes into the under-20 squad looking very, very decent. 16 years old, 180 potential. He could be a real revelation in the future. Owen Fox and Simon Stewart. And I suppose Barry Kavanagh as well, also looking pretty decent, all above 150 there. Under-20 squad, there's a few players there, but no one really. 150 there for Lee Martin. And then under-19 squad, Alan Allen. What a name that is. Alan Allen. Brilliant. He's got the best potential there, 149, 17 years old. Probably may get to that at some point if he plays well. Well, after all of that, I'm now expecting a Scottish team to win the Champions League or something like that. That's what I'm expecting after the World Cup. That is incredible, I've got to say. So, let's look through this then. Celtic have won the title the past 5 seasons in a row. To be expected, I suppose. They've jumped up to 10th in the competition ranking. So we left them on like 22nd, I believe, and they've jumped up year on year. So they must be doing something right to be in the top 10 now. So we'll look at the league table the past 5 seasons, starting with the 2021 season, and get to that league thing there. So, as we can see here, Celtic, of course, winning it, but this time Hamilton getting in second place, beating Rangers to it. There's more Champions League and European places now. There's 2 Champions League places and 3 Europa League places. That's what these colours mean. Ross County and Partick Thistle being relegated. Ross County seem to be going up and down, up and down. They can't really cement themselves despite all this TV money that they are getting. Season afterwards then, does much change? It does a little bit, I've got to say. Celtic champions once again by a huge margin, and Rangers really falling by the wayside this time, finishing down in 6th. Dundee, Hibernian, Hamilton and Aberdeen make up those Europa League places and Champions League places. Motherwell and Queens of the South being relegated. I don't think Queen of the South had the money, but that's kind of to be expected. And Motherwell obviously lost their relegation playoff. 22-23 season, Celtic again winning it by a huge distance. I think they just probably will do for the rest of this experiment now, unless one of these sides really does decide to play well. Hibernian this time comes second, and Aberdeen dropped down to third, with Hamilton and Rangers making it fourth and fifth in those Europa League places. This time only Falkirk getting relegated, Kilmarnock managing to get through their relegation playoffs, and Ross County avoid any relegation battle by goal difference there. So well done, Ross County, you're finally getting away from the relegation zone. 23-24 season, Celtic again champions. I don't have to say it anymore, we just know it, don't you, with Aberdeen in second. Rangers starting to come back now in third place, with Hamilton and Hibs in fourth and fifth. Partick Thistle beside getting relegated this season though, and they fell quite far behind St Johnstone and Ross County, who again avoiding another relegation battle there. St Johnstone win their relegation playoff. And then the season we've just had, again, Celtic champions, but by a small margin this time, and lost a few of their last games actually, so they only win the title by 5 points at the end, which I think was the lowest margin we've seen so far. Hamilton get Champions League, Rangers, Hearts and Aberdeen finish in that top 5. I think for the first time in this part of the experiment, Hibs finish outside those European places. Queen of the South get relegated, and Kilmarnock are in that playoff, relegation playoff final, but they did win 3-0 against St Mirren, so I think they're going to be pretty safe in the second leg. Right, let's look at some transfers then. And Jordan Ayew, who did move to Celtic, I think maybe the season before this, has just gone to Chelsea for £24 million. I think he just had the one season, didn't he, at Celtic? Or he had 2 seasons at Celtic, stolen for a profit and went on to Spartak Moscow on a free, then Hertha Berlin. So he's in a downward spiral, really, has old Jordan Ayew. But had a decent time at Celtic, we've got to say. Liam Lindsay goes from Aberdeen to Rangers, and Liam Moore goes from Reading to Celtic, both for £19 million. They're the biggest transfers there. Celtic, once again, being the biggest spenders, and Hamilton getting there with a few big ones as well. Bright Osei Samuel goes from QPR to Hamilton. He's a Lincoln Loco player we had for a little while at some point. He's a decent player, but he's championship at best, I've got to say. So that's the kind of calibre of players Hamilton are bringing at the moment. 21-22 season then. Another player leaving. This time it's Lunin from Celtic to Dortmund for £20 million. But Britta Sombolonga does come into Aberdeen 15 for rising to £21 million. That's a decent signing for Aberdeen, to be fair. I've got to say, I back that one. Luan signs for Celtic now. He's a bit of a football manager wonder kid. He always seems to do quite well. Always goes to Tottenham in my save for some reason. But this time went to Man City first and then to Celtic for £14 million. So he's a decent player. He's got some good stats on him. I thought he was more of a winger myself, but I guess he's not. Maybe, I don't know. Didn't really break into Man City's side at all, but then moved to Celtic and had a pretty good career there, I've got to say. He does pretty well, good average ratings there. So I think he's had a quite decent career at Celtic. The 22-23 season, Kyle Walker-Peters going from Derby to Celtic for £15 million. The young fullback doing pretty well. He's now at Watford, actually. Didn't spend too long there. Moved to Watford for £2.9 million after having a poor time in Scotland, actually. Didn't really play very well at all in the opportunities he was given. Douge, who we spoke about last episode, has gone now from Celtic to Liverpool. He was there for a good couple seasons, to be fair. Still at Liverpool. We made a bit of profit on him, and he had a good little stint at Celtic as well, so I think they'll be happy with the way he played for them. I mean, Celtic dominating this season, the 22-23 season. They spend so much money. Aberdeen and Hamilton in there a little bit. Aberdeen spend a lot of money in the lower reaches of the millions, I suppose, but I suppose it's Celtic and Aberdeen currently dominating the spending. Season afterwards, Hamilton tried to get in there as well, spending £17 million on Alexander Sorloth. That was quite a lot of money to be spending for Hamilton there. Is he any good? Let's have a little look at him. If we can click on him. He's, as a striker, he looks alright, to be fair. He doesn't look special, but he looks alright. He's still there, which is alright. The biggest transfer there for £27 million, rising to £39 million. Valentino Larezo from Hertha Berlin to Celtic. He is a right-sided midfielder, and again, he's got some good stats, but he doesn't really look to be a standout player at all or anything like that. So I don't know, it's the reputation of these sides hasn't increased enough to get in these real top quality players yet by looks of things. And then the season we've just had, these are the transfers. The biggest one, Jefferson Lerma going from Liverpool to Celtic. Is he a regen or a real player? A real player, apparently, from Colombia. He looks alright as a central midfielder. He's got some good physical stats on him. But again, there's nothing stand out too much about him. Real life is in Levante at the moment, has moved to Liverpool for £13 million and had, well, not a very good career. They didn't really play much at all, but Celtic played very well. 32 games, 7.31 rating. He's had a turnaround in his career, I've got to say. Josh Vela going from Bolton to Aberdeen for £8.5 million. He's a decent little player in real life, I know for sure, and he's played at Bolton his entire career, just about. Went to Aberdeen, went on Hamilton at loan, hasn't really broken into any squads, actually. So that's a bit of a disappointment for him, I've got to say. I thought he'd break in a little bit more than he has done. And I'm trying to look down here. Josef Martinez from Atlanta United to Aberdeen, and he really lit up the MLS last season, I've got to say. He really did really well. Had a long career with Atlanta in this save, and went to the MLS. I went to the SPL, played 24 games, but only scored 4 goals after getting 20 and 30 2 seasons before. So a real downward spiral there in his form. The last one I'll point out, another Lincoln player from a Lincoln loco, at least a bit of a legend for Lincoln. Roshawn Williams goes from Millwall to Hibernian for £4 million. Didn't have quite the same career as he did with Lincoln, I've got to say, going to Millwall and now going on to the Ladbrokes Premiership. Has a decent season, but nothing stand out, I've got to say, for Roshawn. Right, I don't think there's going to be a consistent enough team. I don't think teams getting to the knockout stages is going to be... I don't think teams getting to the knockout stages of European competitions is going to be consistent enough to look through it. So we're going to go team by team once again in this episode. We're going to start with Celtic, who won the title every single season. In this first one, the 2021 season, win all their qualification games very easily and get into Champions League Group F, beat Basel once, but then lose the other leg and then lose to Dortmund and Juventus twice each. That puts them bottom or third in their group. Season afterwards, go straight into the Champions League playoffs. So that's obviously with the league increasing its reputation. They can join the European competitions at higher stages. So they joined in the playoffs this time, played against PAOK, beat them. In the Champions League once again, slightly better performance, beating Napoli once and drawing with Tottenham once, but lost the other time against Tottenham and lost twice to Real Madrid, which knocked them out of the competition. Season afterwards, same story, get through the playoffs into Group G, but they lose to Man United twice, lose to Napoli once, and then draw with Bayern twice and Napoli once. So knocks them out and finish bottom of their group. Funnily enough, same story the next season. Get to the playoffs, win the playoffs, and then lose all their games basically to Chelsea, Atletico Madrid and Dinamo Kiev. And then the season we have just had, they go straight into the group stages. So winning the title now in Scotland puts you straight into the group stages. So that's good going. They beat PSG once, 2-1. That was pretty good. And got a draw against Man United and Leverkusen, but then lost the other games against those sides. So they get bottom of their group again. But at least they're consistently getting into the Champions League, which is what we want to see as progression. Right, Hamilton Academicals now this time. Let's have a look at them. This first season in the Euro Cup, through to the fourth qualifying round after beating some relatively easy-ish teams, but lose to CSK Moscow, so get knocked out. Season afterwards, they're in the Champions League, obviously, because that's when it expanded, I guess, to have two teams qualify for Champions League. They get in it this time, and they lose in the best place playoff, the third qualifying round. There's so many weird names, I can never get my head around it, but they lose to Dinamo Kiev 6-0. Go into the Euro Cup group stages, but draw against Fenerbahce, Hertha Berlin and Vigo, and then lose the other games. So they finish probably bottom of their group. 22-23 season, a little bit disappointing. They win their first qualification round for the Europa League against Stajaran, but then lose 6-4 on aggregate to Southampton in the fourth qualifying round. Season afterwards, they go straight into the group stages. So I guess coming third now puts you into the group stages for the Europa League, which is pretty good. And they do quite well. They beat Genk, they beat PSV, they beat Başakşehir, and they beat Genk, lose the other two games against PSV and Başakşehir, but it put them probably second in the group. They go through to play Marseille, and unfortunately, just narrowly lose to them in the first knockout rounds. That's good to see from Hamilton. They're getting further and further now in Europe, and I'm liking that. Season afterwards, though, they do go backwards in the season we've just had. They beat Sion in the Euro Cup third qualifying round, but then lose to PAOK in the Euro Cup fourth qualifying round, the one just for the group stages, so they get knocked out there. And that's everything from Hamilton. So we'll go back now, have a look at Rangers and see what they've done. Right, this first season then in the Euro Cup qualification rounds, they beat Capaz, they beat Watford, but then lose on away goals to Ghent, which is really unfortunate, the worst way to go, right before the group stages as well, which is frustrating. Same story this season afterwards, they get to that fourth qualifying round, but lose once again just before the group stages, so they're getting more and more frustrated, Rangers fans, I bet. Season afterwards, not anything, because they must have finished down sixth that season. That's when they had their bad season. The season afterwards, though, they do pretty well. They get into the fourth qualifying round after beating Lech. They beat Young Boys, and they're in Euro Cup Group B. They beat Real Hispalas twice. I think that's Real Betis, actually, to you and me in real life. Tottenham, however, and Nice become too strong, and they lose to them both, so they must have come third in their group, I'd imagine. And then the season we just had, they go straight into the group stage. They must have finished third the season before that, so they go into the group stages. They beat Krasnodar, draw against PSV and Southampton and Krasnodar again, but lose to Southampton and PSG the second time round, so they must have just finished third. They must have just missed out on making the knockout stages of this competition. So good going for Rangers, I've got to say. They're in the group stage and things like that. There's more teams in the group stages, which is what I like to see. So there is progression being made. Right, we'll look at Hearts now, but in this first season, they're not in anything. And actually, they're only in it once by looks of things. In the 23-24 season, they get into the Euro Cup second qualifying round, beat Botev, but then lose to Valencia in the third qualifying round, and they're not in that season. So I thought they were in a bit more than that, but apparently not Hearts. So we'll brush over them pretty quickly. Aberdeen are a side to look at now, and we know that they've done pretty well in recent years. Right, we'll start in the 2021 season with them. They get through all their qualification rounds, come against Besiktas and win on penalties in the end in that game to put them into Euro Cup Group D, where they beat Ruben twice, beat Dinamo in Croatia, but then they lose to Dinamo and Sporting and draw with Sporting, which was enough though to put them second in the group, I think. They come up against Genk in that first knockout round and lose, unfortunately. They win the first leg 2-1, but lose the second leg 3-1. So they'll be disappointed with the way they lost that, I think, in the second leg. But I suppose they can't be too hard on themselves. 21-22 season, they get through their qualification round against CSKA, Sofia and Luzern, but then lose to Arsenal twice, lose to Torino once, but then beat Torino and Zrinski. Unfortunately, though, those 3 wins weren't enough to qualify them for the later stages. They just must have slightly missed out, I think, on those later stages of the competition. 22-23 season for Aberdeen was a pretty good one by looks of things. They beat Luzern, beat Feyenoord, and then narrowly lose, I say narrowly, but lost 4-1 on aggregate to CSK Moscow in the Champions League best place playoff, the final stage before the group stages. But it does mean they get put in the Euro Cup instead. So they beat Malmo, they beat them twice, they beat Steaua Bucharest once and draw the other game and lose to Lazio twice. So it must have put them second in their group. They go up against Fiorentina and have 2 draws, but however, they lose on away goals. Again, an agonising way to go, especially against a real good opposition like Fiorentina. So they would have fancied themselves, I think, if they got through that to try and get a bit further. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. Season afterwards, literally, basically the same thing happened again. They get through the qualification rounds into the Euro Cup group stages. They lose twice to Valencia, but then win their other games against Dinamo Moscow and Dinamo. And then they get into the first knockout round, but this time are thoroughly beaten by Athletic Bilbao. 24-25 season is the final season, of course, in this part of the experiment. They get through that first Champions League qualification round, but then lose to Porto in the one just for the group stages. It puts them into the Euro Cup instead, and I think they must have topped their group. They lose to Genk once, but then win 4 and draw 1 against Austria Wien, which put them against Lazio in the first knockout round, but a 2-1 loss in aggregate was too much for them. So we've seen some really good stuff so far from Scottish Premiership sides, getting into the group stages and narrowly losing in the first knockout rounds. Hopefully next time we'll see a bit more progression. The final team we'll look at then is Hibs, but in this first season they weren't anything. The season afterwards though, 21-22 season, they're in the Euro Cup second qualifying round, but then lose to RB Leipzig in the third qualifying round. Season afterwards, they go straight into the group stages. They must have come third that season, season before rather. However, they lose to Inter Milan, they lose to Borussia Mönchengladbach twice, win twice against Trabzonspor, but then lose to a draw with Inter Milan. Must have put them third in their group, so they didn't progress any further. 23-24 season, not in it at all. They must have finished a bit further down the table. But then the 24-25 season, they go through the qualification round against Stadler and Hajduk Split, but then lose to SK Rapid Wien in the fourth qualifying round, the one just before the group stages. So, I mean, I've got to say, I've been impressed so far from what I've seen from Scotland, the Scottish national side especially with their World Cup win, and the league sides are really starting to show some promise now with the money they've been giving year on year on year. So they get 100 million every season, remember, and that is really starting to benefit them. Perhaps not quite so much in the transfer market. I thought it would have helped a little bit more, but perhaps that is to do with limited reputation at the moment with some of these sides. Once they start to get into the later stages of European competitions, we're going to see some huge signings, I think, so look forward to that. So thank you very much for watching today's episode. Make sure you do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and I will see you next time for some more Scottish TV money action.